So the ultimate act of resistance, the highest expression of African and New African culture in the United States, whether it was collectively or individually, were acts of either physical rebellion or of slave rebellions. And of course, petty maroonage, which is running away, which nearly broke the back of slavery because so many blacks ran away. All of these were acts of culture. They indicated a resilience among our people that no matter how down we may have felt, we could make the effort to get up and move on. And the cultural qualities of our people during enslavement, the ultimate ones were the qualities of transcendence, that is, rising above a situation, no matter how bad it was. And this again had to do with us forging a new African culture here and the continuation of African culture in the Caribbean and South America. Now, what I want to do is use Frederick Douglass as an example of this, because I think that he provides some very good examples of this resilience and resistance. He also provides some very good examples of going to the lowest point that a human being could go and then rising above it. Douglass' worst experience in enslavement was when he faced the slave breaker, Covey, C-O-V-E-Y. And the brutality of Covey was such that it put Frederick Douglass in the worst state, mental, psychological, spiritual, in his life, because Covey worked him to death and beat him nearly to death. And that was the nature of this man. Frederick Douglass had been leased out like you lease out a chicken, a cattle or whatever, for a period of time to Covey by his so-called slave master. And so Frederick Douglass described this experience with Covey as an experience of brokenness. He felt broken. And one of the early viewers in this show made that comment that she had felt broken, meaning in this society today, some of these same forces are trying to do the same thing to us as a people. So he described his circumstance, and this is about as bad as it gets. And most Africans didn't reach this level, but some did. Many who did could rise above it, and some didn't. He said, "I was broken in body, soul, and spirit. My natural elasticity was crushed. My intellect languished." Listen to this. "The disposition to read departed. The cheerful spark that lingered about my eye died. The dark night of slavery closed in upon me, and behold, a man transformed to a brute." You hear me? This is the brilliant Frederick Douglass that we would know later. But this is the level to which this so-called slave breaker had brought him. So Frederick Douglass sought to avoid Covey. What he did is he went to the slave master that owned him and had leased him to Covey and begged him to let him return to him, because ain't nobody wants to be returned to any slave master, but this one here, Covey, was about as bad as it got. And that one that he went to said, "Well, I know you did something wrong and you got to go back," because Frederick was just an investment for him. "I'll let you sleep overnight, but you got to go back the next morning." So going back meant whipping, possibly mutilation, And so he went back. But this is about how the liberation movement, in this case, this is an example of personal resistance, is an act of culture. So I really want you to get what Frederick got that gave him a big helping hand. So on his way back, typical of the African, got to understand the cultural climate we were operating then. Typical of the African, he usually didn't make moves unless he got advice from his elders. That's what we always used to do. Some of you ain't doing that anymore. Some of you are running around here talking about you don't need to take these shots, and you're citing all this data that you got on the internet, but all the people dying are the ones that don't have shots. I know some of you don't want to hear this, and I respect you. I'm not going to call you what a lot of people would call you. But if there was a plot to kill you, you're executing it right now, because you ain't listening to elders for the most part. I know those of you that watch this show, yeah, some of you, but a lot of us are not. With these external forces that have led us to choose between two cultures, we're listening to somebody a minute older or younger than us. If we're gangbangers, we're listening to somebody who spent most of his life in jail. They don't even know how to pull off a successful any kind of enterprise, legal or illegal. And so, we're doing stuff that ain't got no common sense. Some of us wearing masks, but not taking a shot. And others not wearing a mask and not taking a shot. So, but in those days, we listened to our elders. And I do all the time, and not just my elders. Anytime I got something that I haven't got the answer to, I ask my wife, what do you think? I'll go around and ask different people, what do you think? And then I'll take the best view. And if it's not the one of someone that thought I should take their advice, too bad. I'm going on what I think is best. That's how you make good decisions. That's why I've never lost a battle. I'm a strategist, but I ain't got all the answers. And so in this case, Frederick was smart enough to go back to this vicious, savage Covey. He decided to stop on his way back and visit an old elder by the name of Sandy Jenkins. He was just one of many of the elders that, we've relied on for our growth and development. The institution of elderhood is one of many institutions that survived the Middle Passage in America and made us strong. It's been weakened more by drugs than anything else, but it is still there. For anyone that's got sense, they'll go to somebody who's not talking nonsense. Of course, I listen to nonsense too, because as Coltrane said, he learned from the worst musicians. There was something they could do that he couldn't do. I'm the same way. I got a good ear. I listen. See me running this mouth? I'm a listener, baby. I'm an organizer. I listen. Some of my best decisions, financially, politically, otherwise, have come from other people. And I give credit. I'm not going to say that was my idea. I'll tell the person, because he may not have known it. You're the one that gave me that idea. Oh, really? Yeah. So he goes to Sandy, and he wants to know, what should he do? And then his comment was, this was a compliment. He said, Sandy was an old advisor, meaning a wise advisor. And Sandy was an enslaved African married to a free African woman. He was going at that time to visit her because you had those relationships at that time. And so Sandy took Fred into the forest after giving him some advice. He basically told him, you got to go back, because unless he was prepared to escape, and if he wasn't, he'd probably get caught, then you got no choice. You're going to have to go back. But being a wise elder, he took Frederick into the woods where a certain root grew. Because, see, in these days, we had root doctors. By the way, Toussaint was a root doctor, trained by his father, a root doctor, or herbalist, And so in this forest, a particular root grew, and Sandy picked it, gave it to Frederick, and gave him this advice. He told him to carry this root in the right side of your pocket. And he said that as long as he carried this root on his right side, and I'm quoting what Sandy said, quote, it would render it impossible for Kobe or any white man to whip you. You hear me? Now, Mr. Sandy cited as evidence that he had carried this root in the right pocket for years. And since he had carried it, a white man had never delivered a blow to him, and he never expected that one would ever try. Now, of course, Frederick wasn't all that religious. If you know anything about Frederick Douglass, he was spiritual in the sense that he was a good person, probably believed in God, but he wasn't into a lot of the spirit practices of a lot of blacks at that time. So Frederick, like a lot of you, thought, well, hey, root ain't got no power. They can't do anything for me. You know what I mean? That's what he thought, you know? And so, but Sandy convinced him. He said that it would not do him any harm if it did not do him any good. Now, see, that's a wise elder. He's got you trapped in some good logic there. You know what I mean? What's it going to hurt you? So Fred stuck it in his pocket because he wasn't old then. He was a young man. And he pocketed the root on his right side, made sure it wasn't on the left. Now, that's telling you something. And then he went up to Kobe. This was Sunday, when he's supposed to get a whipping. More than that, because he had left the plantation. You know, he had no permission. He didn't have no letter or nothing. You know what I mean? And Kobe walked right by. And Fred started to question, well, maybe this root's got something to it. Hey. But then he said, maybe not, because this is Sunday. He's not doing this because this is typical of the worst slave masters. The worst ones were good old Christians. You know what I mean? Most savage going. The first ship to ship us over here. Good ship, Jesus. You know what I mean? Good for what? So he said, it may be different on Monday.